Good morning, everybody. How's it going? Awesome. You guys are really good looking. So I'm Darshan. I'm a first-year AAAS fellow at the Environmental Protection Agency on the innovation team, and I thank you all so much for coming. We've been working on this for a few months, and it's great to see so many people coming out and already engaging. So to get us started off, we've invited a very passionate meteorologist and climate scientist, Rear Admiral David Titley, who spent decades at the Navy studying the linkages between climate change, the Arctic, and implications on maritime issues. A science nerd from his toddler days, he played with his first thermometer at the age of 4 and has slowly but surely, through a lot of hard work, worked his way up to being professor of practice in the Department of Meteorology at Penn State University and founding director of Penn State's Center for Weather and Climate Risk, Solutions to Weather and Climate Risk. After his talk, we have 35 minutes scheduled for this session, so after his talk, we're hopefully going to have 10 or 15 minutes for Q&A. So let's give Dr. Titley a warm welcome.
Now our first part is always to see, does the AV come back like it did half an hour ago? And the answer is, okay, yeah, we actually have this, because you see, I got a screen here that says I should be surfing the AAAS internet right now, but we won't do that. Okay, well, thanks very much, and really thanks to AAAS for inviting me, and to Darshan and the organizers in particular. It's actually very great honor to be here and talk about this. This is a little bit different than some of the stuff I normally talk about. I'll try to get not so much into the governance, because my guess is about 80 or 90% of everybody in the audience, and certainly the following panelists, have forgot more about governance than I'll ever know. But I will talk a little bit about some of the change, kind of first order, like why are we here? And the resilience, and just some things that I have seen just really through experience that have worked, and maybe some things that didn't work quite as well as we would hope. So actually, some of this stuff has already been accomplished here in the previous talk. Why do we care? And we've talked about, of course, we're going to talk a lot about climate change, but climate change is just one of the really important issues that we're going to deal with here in the 21st century. The demographics are going to be pretty important. We're going up to 7, 8, some people think 9 billion people. And those people, by and large, are becoming richer. And at least today, when you are richer, you tend to consume more. So how do we put all of that together? It's a pretty extreme case to say, well, we shouldn't let people get richer or do this or do that. I mean, you pretty much, it's like that's a non-starter. So here's the reality. So how are we going to come up with the solutions to deal with that? It's already been mentioned, I think I heard in the audience, food, energy, water. Oh, by the way, those things are all really correlated. There may be some talks on that, but the bottom line is they're really correlated. For the AV guys, is there any way to kill the lights here on the stage? Okay, all right, thanks. We'll keep pressing there. The other part of our world today, again, whether we like it or not, it's just kind of a reality. Is on the top right there is we're really a globalized society, a globalized world. So it used to be, maybe 20 years ago, 30 years ago, if you had really bad floods in Asia or something, and it's like, well, it's too bad that there are floods in Asia. But nowadays, you get floods in Asia that can impact disk drives. And it's like, well, so what? Well, that's our economy, because where's the warehouses of the world? It's the shipping containers. It's the shipping containers on the ocean, and if those things don't have stuff in them because Thailand or wherever got really hard hit by a flood, that climate change issue, that extreme weather issue, halfway around the world can impact our economy, our jobs, our security. And then finally, I'll just put up technology. So this is a graph of Moore's law. There's lots of ways to show technology. When I talked a little while ago to some really smart folks out at Sandia National Lab, that's probably like repetitively redundant. I'm not sure anybody at the DOE labs are not smart people. But they tell me that, Moore's law, from what they can see, is going to keep on going, so we haven't reached the end of this. So what does that drive? That drives a lot of things. It drives the ability to see data. It drives that transparency, whether you want it or not. In so many things, we have this transparency. So kind of whatever we're doing is on display. That can be good. That can make some things a little bit more challenging. And then finally, I have these, I'm not sure if you can see it or not, but I have these debonair gentlemen up here. And any idea who they are? I don't have a lot of interactive stuff, but I got one pop quiz here. They're the European finance ministers. And the reason I have them up here is because, we're going to deal with all this stuff, and we say we're out of money. So, go to OMB. They'll tell you we're out of money, too. Anyone from OMB? I love you like brothers and sisters if you're out there. It's like we've got these big issues, of which climate change is one, and all of these things interact with each other, usually not linearly, and we're going to deal with all of this in what we tell ourselves is a fiscally constrained global environment. So apart from that, it's a pretty easy governance challenge, right? Okay, why do we care? There's, again, you can read the IPCC, you can read the National Climate Assessment, 1,000 pages, 5 volumes, or you can have my one slide. It's people. The polar bears are great, or polar bear plunges are great, but we're probably not going to change the world's energy system for polar bears, just saying. But we might, for people, for you, for me, for our families, for our brothers, sisters, wives, daughters, cousins, nephews, nieces, fellow people in our villages, in our cities, in our towns, we may actually think about that. This is really, it's about us. I mean, not to sound narcissistic, but this is about us. If you want one integrating concept in climate, and there's several you could certainly arguably use. I use water. Too much, too little, wrong place, wrong time. Salty, where it used to be fresh water. Liquid, where it used to be solid. Admiral Allen, former Commandant of the U.S. Coast Guard, very famously said, I don't know about this climate change, but I do know there's water where there used to be ice, and I got to deal with it. The water, acidic, where it used to be kind of neutral. That really impacts the oceans. So water is there. And then maybe the last and perhaps the most important is, it's the change. It's not the economy, stupid, but I would argue it's the change. There's nothing really optimal about our climate, but what has been optimal is being its stability for literally as long as we've had human civilization. That's probably not a coincidence. And you can kind of look at this. This comes out of some work by, down at the bottom there, John Englander, his High Tide on Main Street book. It's basically 500,000 years, really old on the left, today on the right. And you can see carbon dioxide, temperature, sea level. I mean, this is in hundreds of feet, not just a few inches, but hundreds of feet, up, down, up, down, up, down. So when people say climate has always changed and it's always changing, absolutely right. But then when you sort of zoom in to the very right-hand side of that previous chart, what you see is for the last 8,000 years or so, it's been amazingly stable. We've kind of had this Goldilocks period. So now, as we sort of dig up all the carbon, stick it in the air and see what happens, kind of this uncontrolled experiment, do we sort of throw away that stability? And if we do, now how do we deal with this? Not with a human population in the globe of maybe 1 million or so, but as I said, 8-9 billion, all of whom have expectations, Treaty of Westphalia, all that kind of stuff. So we are, not to sound overly dramatic, but we are really pushing the world into a regime that we have not yet seen. So that's what we're doing, and that's why we need to kind of figure out the rules of the game or the governance. I'm just going to show 2 slides on sort of some of the evidence for climate change, and that's going to be it for this. One comes from NASA, one comes from NOAA. These are temperatures, and again, you could have used the British weather set, you could have used the Japanese, you could have used NOAA's. I happen to use NASA's because I got a really cool graphic. Thank you, NASA. This is an average, if you sort of take the average of the middle part of the 20th century, so blue is colder than that, orange and red is warmer. 1947, 48, don't know. If you can see the years that are sort of ticking by here on the lower center. 61, 1969, Man on the Moon. Okay, 70s, Jimmy Carter. 80s, we're in the Reagan years. Bush 41, Clinton, Bush 43, and now this administration. So again, no computer models, no projections, no, well, we're not sure, not any of that. That's just what the observations are telling us there. Okay, well, maybe I made all of that up in my vast conspiracy, right? So, okay, well, let's then go across the street to my friends at NOAA. This is from, again, civilian radar satellite coverage. Again, no models, no projections, no computers with forecasts. This is just what's going on. The white is like the really hard, thick, multi-year ice that the Arctic for many thousands of years has had tons of. The blue is like 1 or 2 year ice, much thinner, much softer. And I'll run it again and watch what happens. And again, the time year is on the bottom, 97, 98. And it's really cool, too. I mean, for weather geeks and like ocean geeks like me, I mean, watching the ice flow out through the Fram Strait and how it moves and da-da-da. But that's not really why I'm showing it. Watch 2005. Watch what happens in 07. 2006, 07. Wham. Where'd the ice go? 08. Everybody said it came back. Yeah, you can see what coming back was. Coming back was like my stock portfolio came back. And then 12. I mean, that's what it was. You know, I love this. It's up 30%. And it's like, yeah, well, so is my IRA, but it's like 30% from what? So this is, I would argue, ladies and gents, this is like one of the biggest changes that we've seen, physical changes on the Earth. And it's happened in like a decade. 20 years ago, most scientists were saying, yeah, this will probably happen, but it's going to take decades and decades or centuries. That was sort of the argument. Boom. So there we are. So those are just two things. I mean, and obviously we can spend weeks and months going through evidence, but those are just two. I'm pretty sure everybody gets it here, but, that's kind of why we're here. So can we, as climate scientists, as physical scientists, do we have any clue as to what's going on? Yeah, not only do we, but we have for a long time. This comes out of a paper in Nature. Sorry, I'm in the AAAS building. I probably should have found a paper out of Science. I apologize. But this came out of Nature. If it looks like it's a Xerox of a Xerox, it's because it is, because in 1980, when this was published, we didn't have the internet. So this was hard copy. Guy named Jim Hansen, not the Muppets guy, the NASA guy, came up with, basically he ran a model. And the model is the black lines. And you can see 60, 70, 80. He ran this in about 1980, and you can kind of see where it went. The red lines that look like sort of a skyscrapers, that's where the actual temperatures were. And then that dark purple line is sort of a smoothed average. Turns out Hansen, this is the all models are wrong. His model was wrong. Is it useful? Yeah, I'd say it was, because it said, we're going to start getting on this upbound escalator here. He kind of undershot. The Earth has warmed more than what Hansen's model said in 1980. Now, can you find other models that said there was more warming than observed? Of course you can. But the fact is not that the model is exactly right or exactly wrong. Almost every weather model, every climate model is wrong in some aspect. It is, by definition, a simplification of reality. But it's useful. It says, hey, guys, there's big changes coming. Okay, we've seen a lot of the, whenever we get a big weather event now, who's heard the attribution? Is it climate change, is it not? Has anybody heard that? Yeah, everybody's heard that. Okay. Sort of reminds me of like being out on the second grade, schoolyard. He did it. Yes, he did. No, he didn't. Yes, he did. No, he didn't. I'm not sure it's all that useful, because, we're kind of living in this changed climate. And the way I sort of think about it is, if you think of any of these extreme events as like a hand that you were dealt, let's say you were playing a card game. Now, when I gave this talk in Utah, I had to say, let's get on a bus, go to the Nevada state line, and then we could have a card game. They got it. So let's say Sandy, for example, is a full house, aces high. Not impossible, but pretty hard to get. Let's say your card deck now kind of looks like that. So maybe climate change has kind of slipped an extra ace or two into the card deck. So now you can kind of get a few more of these extreme hands than you were thinking you would have before. So that's change. What other change? So you take those kind of changes. Here's an example of the Arctic. It's not climate per se, but it sure comes down onto sort of governance, big governance issues. Look at Greenland. If Greenland goes independence, what do we do? Do we care? Do we even know about it? There's a pretty vigorous independence movement going on in Greenland. Huge island, largest island in the world, population of 50,000, sort of could become Kuwait of the North if it went independent. Do we care? Well, the Chinese are sure sending ships over there. They're sending a lot of embassies over there. They have the largest embassy not in Greenland, but in Iceland, so they're paying attention to this. Singapore, Korea, just two examples of countries that have lobbied successfully to be observers in the Arctic Council. They sure look at this stuff. The Finns on the lower right-hand side are taking millions of dollars of private R&D money to basically build a connecting link over one of those trade routes for container vessels, let's say between the Aleutians and between Europe, between Iceland. You'd sort of run this container link through first-year ice, unassisted by icebreakers. Now, maybe they're crazy, maybe it won't work, but I'll tell you, they are putting millions of dollars of their own money into trying to figure this out. Russia and China, that's always good for a little conversation. How are they going to be working together as frenemies, co-opetition? What are they going to be looking at in the Arctic? And how does that impact us? So there's sort of like governance on a big picture questions. Governance on a slightly smaller picture. Within 1 meter of high tide, almost 4 million people in the US live today. And you can kind of see where the hot spots are. We all know where they are: Miami, New Orleans, Sacramento River Basin. That's one that doesn't always get thought about here on the East Coast. New York area, of course. I think I mentioned New Orleans. Norfolk, Virginia, kind of becoming a poster child for this. So then when you get the sea level rise, and this is like the storm surge that came in through various times for the last few hundred years into New York City, sort of that line at the bottom that's sort of slowly going up, that's the amount through sea level rise that's coming in. But the tides count, and the actual storm itself counts. So how are these storms changing? Fish potential, why do I care about that? Well, if you're doing governance, what's the governance for the oceans? The UN, the one that we don't accede to. UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, right? That is kind of how the world does governance. Well, if you're a small island nation, red is bad, blue is better. I'll just put it that way for fish potential. If you're a small island nation out in the Pacific, one, you're kind of fighting the sea level rise itself. Two, your exclusive economic zone is kind of your economy. So let's say your economy goes away. Are you going to think that, hey, this governance regime that we have now is a really good idea? Or are you going to say, maybe we want to change it? So how are we going to deal with that? How are we going to deal with those big pictures? Same thing with agriculture. Red is bad. Green is okay. Blue means you're going to get wetter. A lot of the agricultural regions potentially start to dry out here. And then when you start putting all that together, this is either Center for American Progress, certainly Caitlin Werrell, Frank Francisco have worked on this, many have worked on this, but you start looking at the contribution of wheat failures in various parts of the world, increasing prices, as one of, not the, but one of the contributing factors to Arab Spring, and then you look at the whole national security governance there. I'm told I have 5 minutes. We'll see. Maybe we'll do 5 minutes of Q&A, not 10. We'll see. I've got my counter here. We're okay. We're good. Okay. So, who's heard of the CNA Military Advisory Board put out a report? Who's actually had time to read all 48 pages? I'll bet some people actually haven't here. I know. If I ask that anything outside the Beltway, it's like, are you kidding me? So I made it easier for you. Here it is on one slide, kind of a Wordle thing. But I circled a few of the words that really come up prominently: infrastructure, risk, readiness, water, energy, food. We've talked about those. And kind of, what we were saying, I was one of the authors, is the risks are accelerating, and the climate change is a catalyst here. And we'll have more surprises to come. On the details, absolutely. Guy on the right, that's Niels Bohr. He rather famously said, predictions are tough, especially when they're about the future. I just actually got to listen to a talk from a researcher at the Niels Bohr Institute in Copenhagen. He came here, I didn't go there. And it was a little scary because one of the things he and his fellow researchers are starting to see in the paleoclimate, like 55 million years ago, is as the climate gets warmer, the climate gets more sensitive to each piece of additional CO2 or greenhouse gas that you put in. So it's kind of this positive accelerating feedback. We'll see if that actually holds up. I hadn't heard a lot about that, but that's a little scary to me. So surprises, I'm sure, will be coming. Okay. I'm sure this is what most of the talk today and tomorrow is going to be about. The top just came right from the AAAS website, and the bottom is, sort of on politics from a gentleman named Harold Laswell. I think he was at Yale, if I'm not mistaken, or Princeton. But there's at least in our society, there's certainly a link. If the governance people start doing things that the voters are really unhappy with, you probably get a new set of people to do the governance. So that's kind of our challenge and our opportunity. Because otherwise, this whole adaptation thing's pretty easy, right? I mean, I've got a nice little slide. You just do it. Just do it, right? Just do the adaptive management, right? I mean, it says so right on here. It's in PowerPoint. It must be true. But we know it's not quite that easy. There is some good news, and this actually came out even before the talk. The insurance guys are getting interested. The divestment folks, at Harvard. The president came out, patted the students on the head, said, "Go away, children." They haven't gone away. That's good. Health, security, media, and yes, the environmentalist. I do have a picture of a polar bear in my brief. And the business, how you account for this as risk. The faith-based groups are getting more interested. The Pope had a big conference in the Vatican. So how do we put all that together? And it's like, okay, but before this sounds like too much good news. Remember, anyone have any idea who this guy on the left is? Dan Kahan? You heard about him? He's rather famously done a bunch of studies that basically say just because you give people more facts doesn't mean that they'll all get it. And the guy on the right, Dan Kahneman, Thinking Fast and Slow. I'd really recommend that book for anybody who's trying to do communications. It's a great book. I do not have time to go through it here, but read what these two gentlemen are doing, and then think about how do we communicate in the context for that. In the security guys, they do planning all the time, and it turns out some of the planning is weather and some is climate, and that actually works pretty well. I want to spend, I'll get off the stage before it's time. It's okay. Don't worry. It's okay. I got the time. This is a house I owned for quite a few years down in a place called Waveland, Mississippi. And this is what it looked like on about the 26th of August, 2005. When I came back, that's what the house looked like. So when we say we lost our house, we really did. We have no idea to this day where that house went. It might have gone up to the railway tracks. It might have got sucked out to the Gulf. It's not like there was a lot of cleanup. I mean, this is like my first look at this thing. And that's what the lot looked like. So why do I put that up here? Because this governance stuff really does matter. So it's like, okay, bad things happened on the Mississippi coast. We know that. So what's it like today? And again, I apologize for the lighting in here, but on that top picture, my lot is the one on the right, with the for sale sign. Still has a for sale sign if you want to buy it. I cleaned it up, got rid of the concrete. FEMA was supposed to do that, but well, that didn't happen. The guys on the left, they're convinced that this is never going to happen again, and the rules were such that if you built within the footprint, you could build right back as it was. And they're convinced it's never going to happen again. They're at the same elevation they always were. The guy on the left, on the corner, he's right on the ocean. He's a neighborhood plumber. He's a smart guy. He says, I'm not moving, but I know this stuff's bad juju. So he's up at about 30 feet. And this is what you see, I would argue, without real governance. You see this patchwork. Everybody thinks Mississippi's kind of backwards. I'd argue it's the future. I'd argue that without governance, this is more and more of what we're going to see. And it wasn't that they didn't try. Haley Barbour, the governor, had this whole Mississippi renewal. He enlisted like some of the top new urbanists in the country. Great ideas, from a respected governor that was sort of from his tribe. They wanted nothing to do with it. So my lesson learned, may be right, may be wrong, I haven't shown this scientifically, is the time to tell people they need change is not starting after they've been traumatized. you probably want to start working that beforehand. Because afterwards, there was no interest. People wanted to basically just go back to what it was. And that's hard. You know, Reagan and O'Neill, I mean, you know, an interesting pair, but they were able to do stuff together. Who's our coalition of the willing today? How do we do stuff, you know? I've learned that on the internet, if you want something to go viral, you have to have cute cats. I don't have cute cats, but I do have a cute llama. And the llama is for learn, it's for leading and local action, it's for monitoring and understanding so we do know what we're doing, and then it's for advocacy. It's to ask as a voter, as an individual, what are your elected leaders doing? And there's some good references there. You know, we can screw this up. I don't think we will, but we really can. And if you want an example of how governance and leadership can screw things up, just go back 100 years to World War I. This is an op-ed I wrote with a colleague. It was put in Fox News, really, on the 1st of April. Everybody thought it was an April Fool's joke. But this is what we talked about, and you can read the bullet there. But my caution is that this starts sounding like where we could go if we don't take this challenge seriously. And I don't think any of our political leadership would want to be associated with the failures that led to World War I and 8.6 million deaths there. So I am going to close, and we will have time for Q&A. With this gentleman here, and one of the things that Churchill is at least alleged to have said, the more you dig out, the more you find out he didn't really say any of this stuff, but he's alleged to have said that Americans can always be counted upon to do the right thing after exhausting every other possibility. So, you know, we're probably somewhere in that stage. I'm frequently asked, do I believe in climate change? No, I don't. I'm just convinced by the evidence. But I do believe that America can fix really, really hard problems when we are pressed to. We have done it time and time and time again. We did it for Apollo 13 on very tactical things of how do we get these 3 astronauts back when, you know, the more you read about it, they should have been dead. They really should have been dead. We figured it out. Our country figured it out. We can do amazing things, and we will. But we've got to realize that we've got a big problem to put amazing people onto amazing things. And with that, I will close. We still have 3.5 minutes time. Thank you very much. Got lots of time.
So if you guys just want to come up to the mics for questions, it'll just be a self-made stack. That'd be great.
Or we can have coffee. I think. Slides? Say again?
Do you have backup slides?
I took them all out. I have about 80 backup slides, but I took them out. You guys probably don't want to see that. Thank you very much. Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah, I think there's microphones because they're recording this, and we all know that it's really bad to watch this stuff when you only hear half of it. So, ma'am, and then sir.
Sure. Hi, Bettina Bergu. I work with the Army National Guard. And as you were showing, there's so much information out there. There's so much data. There are graphs, a lot of them global, and they're very helpful and interesting. But in terms of giving information to leadership in planning roles, especially in the military sense, especially in the Army National Guard sense, since we have a defense support for civil authorities role, what kind of information do you think is most critical to provide to them? If you had specific examples for certain databases, or, I think some regions, different types of weather data will be more important than others. Mm-hmm. What kind of information do you think we should make sure that they have so they can plan ahead for the future?
Okay. I mean, it's a great question. And I mean, you can literally do a 2-day conference just to answer that question. But you guys would be really unhappy if I took 2 days to answer it. So I won't do that. I'll try to answer it in less than a minute. What I would start with, and I've sort of had to do this, is understand the customer. Understand, and it's going to be different. Different bases, different missions are going to have different critical things. Some people are going to really care about temperatures. Others are going to care about what we call intensity, distribution, and frequency of rainfall rates. Mm-hmm. Some people care about like training on their ranges, so droughts become a big deal because if it dries out too much, you can't use live ammunition because it sets fires, and fires are usually bad. Mm-hmm. Some people are interested because, so many of the DoD bases have now really become wildlife refuges for endangered species. So you have a lot of regulations, And you've got to, how is that going to change? So first thing is understand what's the question. What are the specific questions? Second
In
thing
terms of
is...
what the mission is, what the function
Yeah,
of that.
yeah. I mean, talk to the customer, talk to the commander, the base commander, or the G3, whoever's running this, the G5, and then the NCA, the National Climate Assessment, is really about as good as it gets for vetted, validated regional information, and then you're going to say, yeah, but it doesn't really answer my need, and you're right. So what we have to do then is sort of take off our deterministic hat and put on our risk management hat and say, okay, but I do understand that there is a range of outcomes. Some are low probability and pretty bad. Some are low probability and it's wonderful. We don't have to do anything. Most is somewhere in the middle. And you do this for risk. It's one thing, God love the DOD. We plan for everything. And we plan for all these low probability, high consequence things. And then at the end of the day, when you're building your budget, you figure out how many of your chips, of your dollars, are you going to put to buy down some of that really dangerous risk. But you can run scenarios. And you may see you run 5 scenarios and you find out 4 of them need capabilities A, B, and C in this changing climate. I would put in my budget to buy some of A, B, and C. I don't know what it's going to be, but that's how I do it. We can talk more offline, but that's kind of how I'd recommend doing it. Sir.
Joe Browder, Admiral. I used to go to some of your conferences at the Johns Hopkins Research Lab. They were wonderful, but I just wondered if, when you were introduced to this audience, you gave them all of your previous titles, because I think they should hear them.
Well, thanks, but I think they're in the bio. I did a bunch of stuff. I did the oceanographer for the Navy and started up with Gary Roughead's leadership, Admiral Gary Roughead, the Task Force on Climate Change. And that is, somebody asked me for a backup slide. That's another thing that's, it sounds almost like a cliche, but it's not, and it's leadership counts. I could not have done a thing in the DOD or in the Navy without the support of the Chief of Naval Operations. The Navy's very hierarchical, and if the CNO, the head guy, is on board, the other guys will at least listen. They may not do it. Now, if you're in the Marines, they do it. But in the Navy, they'll at least listen. And that's good, and that's really all I needed. And there were easily times, especially after the 2010 midterms, where Admiral Roughead could have said, Titley, let's just throttle back on this whole climate change. And I went to him and said, boss, I got the Navy kind of far out here on this stuff. Are you okay? He said, yes. That's leadership, okay? Leadership counts. Leadership can come from below and come up. It can come from the top. It's best when it comes from both directions and kind of meets in the middle. We have it in some places in this town. I would argue we may not have it every place that we need it in this town. But the leadership does count. It doesn't mean we can't do things without it, but it does get harder. So thanks for that, because really Admiral Roughead deserves the shout out. Thanks very much. We good? Okay, thank you. Thanks very much.